Welcome to the Glenn Beck program. I've talked to you on this program before about the Archduke Ferdinand moment. Here's what I've said in the past. I've been talking about this perfect storm for a while, and I've been looking for that Archduke Ferdinand moment. That Archduke Ferdinand was the guy who was assassinated in some, I don't know, some country over in Europe that started World War I. And if I would have told you, back then, hey, we're going to go to war over Archduke Ferdinand being assassinated, everybody would have said you're crazy. Yes, maybe I am. Yes, maybe I am. I'm not sure what ours is, but my sense is we're getting close to that moment that changes the world. Could it be the oil spill? Tonight I want to go back and look at the president's speech and what has been happening. I want to show you the perfect storm conditions and why I think we're moving closer to a historic global moment. And by the way, I'm not saying that this is the moment. Tonight, I'm going to show you the words, not only of American celebrities, but news people, and also American communist revolutionaries who are now stepping to the plate to say, this is the moment. Coming up. First of all, I want to thank you for all of the notes and the kind words and the prayers for my family over the last couple of days. I have gotten notes and emails from all over the world, and it means an awful lot. Thank you. All right. I wasn't here yesterday, and so I want to talk to you a little bit about the speech from the president, because I have a slightly different perspective than I think what most people do, because things are starting to tie together. We're entering a new phase, and we're seeing it played out now in the media. It's the beginning of it, and you must watch for it. We're no longer being nudged to get into line. We're getting shoved now. There is a war being fought, and it isn't against the oil spill. It is on our very way of life. The words I'm hearing now in the media are some of the most shocking words I think I've ever heard. I'm going to play some clips for you tonight. I want you just to really let this wash over you in the context of what I told you 2 weeks ago about America. What is it? America's Future Now, the conference that happened in Washington with the progressives, because history is about to repeat itself. First, I want to start here with the president's address on the BP spill. They are comparing it to Jimmy Carter's famous crisis of confidence speech, where Carter was his usual inept, wimpy self. Obama didn't blow this speech. He did exactly what he wanted to do. This speech was a declaration of war, and I want you to listen to the language.
The one approach I will not accept is inaction. The one answer I will not settle for is the idea that this challenge is somehow too big and too difficult to meet. The same thing was said about our ability to produce enough planes and tanks in World War II.
Okay, what is he talking about here? What's too big? That we can't ever stop it? He won't accept that we can't ever stop this leak? No. He won't accept that we can't fundamentally transform energy in this country and get off of oil. All right. Did you hear the rhetoric? Did you hear the terseness of it? He won't accept it. And World War II. Now, watch this.
I've returned from a trip to the Gulf Coast to speak with you about the battle we're waging against an oil spill that is assaulting our shores and our citizens. Tonight, I'd like to lay out for you what our battle plan is going forward.
Got it? Battle plan. An assault on our shores. World War II. George Stephanopoulos described this as martial language.
Those Oval Office addresses are often used when the nation is at war. And tonight the president used martial language. He talked about a siege, the assault on our shores, and his battle plan to fix it. And he said we have to rally together. And I think what the White House was reaching for tonight is the feel of Franklin Roosevelt during World War II in those fireside chats. And the president even said, during World War II, they said we couldn't build enough planes and tanks, but we did. We can beat this as well.
Okay. Make no mistake, this was a war speech. This was Obama's first speech from the Oval Office as president. Now, presidents usually give addresses from the Oval Office for extremely unusual events. They use them for major economic news, addressing a tragedy, or an announcement of war. Don't get me wrong. Understand clearly, this oil spill is a disaster. It is a massive disaster. It's an actual crisis, not a manufactured one like healthcare was. But remember, it was Obama who went on national TV to plead for the passage of the stimulus bill because America may not make it. We may never recover if it doesn't pass. And he did not use the Oval Office for that one. So the complete and total collapse of America doesn't warrant a speech from the Oval Office, but an oil spill that the president has waited months to address and golfed 6 times, went to a Paul McCartney concert. In the meantime, suddenly does warrant the Oval Office and him declaring war. Declaring war on an oil spill. I went and I looked up some history. The answer is always found in history. This speech may as well have been given by Woodrow Wilson or FDR. They are using the model of these two men for Barack Obama. Progressives need a crisis with the, remember these words, the moral equivalent of war. The moral equivalent of war to pass unpopular bills. Now, this isn't my theory. Remember, it was Woodrow Wilson, the propaganda specialist, Edward Bernays. Edward Bernays, this guy, America is the one that really brought propaganda to the rest of the world. This guy was so excited about propaganda and how well the war propaganda worked in World War I that he wanted to expand the idea after the war. He said, quote, "It was, of course, the astounding success of propaganda during the war that opened the eyes of the intelligent few in all departments of life to the possibilities of regimenting the public mind." In other words, the few could come up with some crazy campaigns and some commercials, and they could sell it and shape the public mind. He said, "It was only natural after the war ended that intelligent persons should ask themselves whether it was not possible to apply a similar technique to the problems of peace. They needed a moral equivalent of war." Bernays was an incredibly influential man. He was mentioned in the diary of Goebbels. Goebbels said the reason why they lost World War I was because of this man. And they learned their lesson. The Nazis learned propaganda from us. It was the emergency propaganda in Germany that led the Jews eventually to the ovens, because Jews were causing the problems. Jews, there were just too many in Europe. Jews took over the banks. Got it? They created a moral equivalent of war, and then it led to war. Some of the worst villains in all of history have used the idea of propaganda the way the American Bernays under Woodrow Wilson intended it to be used. It is a progressive tactic, and it works both on manufactured and real crisis. Because you will say, if there is a crisis, you will say, well, we got to do something. How many times have we heard that? We heard it with the financial crisis. We heard it with George W. Bush, I contend, a progressive who put the massive Patriot Act through after 9/11. Don't get me wrong. I was for the Patriot Act when it happened because I hadn't read enough history yet. I said, well, we've got to do something. We had to do something against a foreign enemy. And so we created the Department of Homeland Security. We took our shoes off, we took our belts off, and we believed it. We actually believed for about 4 years, maybe 3 years, that this guy was going to keep us safe. But then in his second term, something happened. We realized that they weren't even addressing the problem on our borders. We realized, wait a minute, how can you be protecting the American people and yet leaving our southern and our northern border wide open? We realized it wasn't about protecting us. It was about something else. It was about big government and control. Progressives on the right. And it didn't feel right. Barack Obama has done the same now. When Barack Obama came into office, one of the first things he did was to change the name, the War on Terror. He said it's not a war on terror. It is, well, that's a spooky picture. It's an overseas contingency operation. He said there is no war on terror or war on Islamic extremism. No war on terror. But now, in a speech, he's announcing a war on an oil slick. It doesn't feel right, does it? The left and the right progressives, they're the same. One wants global control through the UN. This is Woodrow Wilson. The right wants a U.S.-led global control. This is Bush. This is any of them. U.S.-led global control, UN-led global control. Here is war on global warming, war on terror and nation building.